Everyone, and thank you for joining us. I am thrilled to be with you today to discuss the local food system and how we can support farmers and grow a thriving and accessible network of local producers and distributors of healthy food. You may know that I was recently reappointed to serve once again on the House Agriculture Committee. And this morning we just chose our subcommittees, and I'm really excited to get to work. I previously served on this committee for my first 3 terms in Congress, beginning in 2013 through 2018. And I was the first representative to serve on the committee in decades. I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to bring New Hampshire's voice to the table once again, on behalf of our farmers and our beautiful landscape, and on behalf of eaters across the Granite State. Our state's agricultural landscape is characterized by small family farms and diverse growing operations. We're also fortunate in New Hampshire to see growing momentum to buy local, and I'm excited to hear more about your efforts on this issue today. The COVID-19 pandemic challenged our communities and our systems in many, many ways, and the food system has especially been impacted. So I'm interested to hear the ways the pandemic impacted your businesses and the creative solutions that you have undertaken to keep your employees and communities safe, while also making sure that people were fed. I'm intrigued to hear your visions for the future of our local food system. The pandemic is unfortunately not the only major challenge facing our communities. We know that climate change will continue to have major impacts on everything from our economy to our agricultural industry. And we also know that we must do a better job of addressing racial and economic equity in our food system, ensuring that we all have access to healthy food and can participate in our food system as consumers, producers, and beyond. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts, how we can build a resilient local food system while supporting local farmers, ensuring equitable access, and combating climate change. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Erin Hale of the New Hampshire Food Alliance to get us started.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for having me today and for hosting this great conversation. I'm Erin Hardy-Hale from the New Hampshire Food Alliance. We are a statewide network connecting the organizations, businesses, communities, and individuals that are working to grow a thriving, sustainable, and equitable food system here in New Hampshire. The Food Alliance is coordinated by the UNH Sustainability Institute. And we bring people together to build relationships and also to catalyze learning, collaboration, and collective action around these issues. So you're going to hear a lot from folks on the panel today, many of whom are partners with the New Hampshire Food Alliance, about the critical role our local farm, fish, and food businesses have played during the pandemic and what we can do to better support them. But I'd like to touch on some other issues that we've been focused on with the Food Alliance that are related to food insecurity and equity that some of our other panelists might not touch on today. So as you know, food insecurity is not a new problem here in New Hampshire, but the pandemic and economic downturn, coupled with New Hampshire's abysmally low minimum wage, has really exacerbated the problem in our state, as it has in many others. So current estimates right now are that about 1 in 6 households are food insecure today in New Hampshire, and that's about twice as many as were food insecure prior to the pandemic. So there are federal nutrition programs like SNAP, WIC, school breakfast and lunch, pandemic EBT have been a lifeline to many families, but they really aren't reaching everybody who needs them. Eligibility restrictions, cumbersome application and renewal processes, and low benefit amounts are some of the reasons why these programs are under-enrolled or aren't reaching folks. So extending waivers for these programs for as long as possible is something we'd really love to see happen. Lack of communication about the programs and outreach in culturally appropriate forms are also barriers to getting the word out. So this means that it's often our non-white and non-English speaking residents that are left out of some of these really important assistance programs. We've also, though, seen a growth in many new collaborations to get locally grown, produced food to people in need. So the New Hampshire Feeding New Hampshire program, which provides New Hampshire food bank pantries with funds specifically to purchase locally produced fruits, vegetables, dairy products, meats, as well as infrastructure that they need to store those products, helps both our local producers and our food pantry customers. We also have seen all kinds of great examples where restaurants are partnering with pantries to create ready-made meals that can be easily delivered. And we've seen a growth in nutrition incentive programs like Granite State Market Match and Double Up Food Bucks, where SNAP customers can double the value of their purchases of fresh and locally produced fruits and vegetables. They've seen their customer base soar, but it would continue to grow if more funding for these programs were available. Farm to school programs are also a really important way for us to increase access to locally produced food for people, but reimbursement rates for schools are low and can limit what our districts can do. On the equity front, as I mentioned earlier, historically marginalized people in New Hampshire are being disproportionately impacted by COVID, both in terms of health and economics. And another place we see this is in our agricultural labor force. Farm labor is in scarce supply here in New Hampshire. And as we've seen, farm laborers are essential workers that should be entitled to coronavirus relief benefits, worker protections, and access to healthcare. So those are just a few of the issues that we are working on as the Food Alliance in terms of trying to build collaboration and coalitions around ensuring food access and equity, and creating these win-win collaborations where we're supporting food access and also our local food economy. And I know our partners will also jump in with all kinds of great examples of ways that our producers have adapted and innovated, and I'll be happy to answer more questions. So I will turn it over to Seth.
Thank you, Representative Kuster, for your attention over the years to local agriculture, and thank you, everybody, for inviting me to be able to talk about some of the things that Cooperative Extension has done. So we really were out of the gate helping growers understand the rules, regulations, funding opportunities as they came out. A lot of the CARES Act, Family First Coronavirus Relief Act, various things to that effect. Growers turn to us and say, what does this mean? What do we have to do to comply? What are their opportunities? We also had a great network, many of the partners, people here, as well as through Farm Service Agency, the state government, in terms of reciprocating the information, bringing it down to the farmers, or not bringing it to the farmers, not down by any means, and bringing it back up to decision makers as well. What doesn't work. So as an example, when the EIDL loans weren't available to farms, we were really quick to be able to communicate that. When PPP originally didn't take into account sole proprietors and their wages, we were able to communicate that and help things get fixed there. One of the things that I think that is really going to is a need that we're seeing out in the field for local ag resilience is direct technical assistance to farms for farm management skill sets, labor management, conflict resolution, financial analysis, record keeping. It's to me today what soil health was a decade ago. And the model that soil health was addressed with by bringing public-private collaborations together, backed by some federal funding, was so highly successful. We now see that from a conservation district, you can borrow for free tillage equipment. You can have cover cropping. You can do all these wonderful things. And today, I think that we need a model like that for farm management. Some of that exists. Senator Leahy was able to work with others to be able to fund the Northern Border Regional Commission with several million. $740,000 of that was awarded to what's now called the Agriculture Viability Association. And New Hampshire received 3 of those subgrants. Only $150,000 for 18 months. Not a lot of money for all these different groups. We have over 10 organizations, public and private, working together, deploying to farms to help them with succession planning, record keeping, financial analysis. The list goes on. How farms can take advantage of this new surge for local demand that was higher than pre-COVID in many cases, by determining the appropriate scale. So those are the type of efforts I believe are going to be needed to really help deal with scaling up and meeting the need. According to the National Agricultural Statistics Service, 82% of New Hampshire farms gross under $25,000. So we certainly know that we have to pay attention to profit margins. We certainly know that we have to look at scaling up. And so those are the things that I think are going to be critical to get businesses to the next level.
So
And
Seth, can I just jump in real quick? I'm trying to refrain and wait until we get to the Q&A, but I can't resist. So the Northern Borders Regional Commission is now up to $30 million per year in grants. It's for Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and upstate New York. And New Hampshire, we work with this program all the time, and it's a great program for farmers, any farmers that are listening in, but also if we could figure out the applicant for that type of grant, I think that would be a perfect, because the sweet spot there is rural communities and economic development and making a difference in strengthening our rural communities. There are also other projects and grants that are available through the USDA Rural Development Program. And my staffer, Charlotte Harris, is on, who pulled this together. And Charlotte is available to talk to anyone about any of these grant opportunities. And then the last thing I'd like to look into is the Small Business Association has lots, administration has lots of programs for small businesses, just exactly along the lines that you're talking about. They have advisory programs where retirees from the business community will advise small businesses on accounting or business planning or succession planning or workforce issues. So everything that you just talked about. And we can look into that and see if we can create more of a partnership between the SBA and the the family farms here in New Hampshire. So thank you for that.
very exciting. And with those comments, I have the pleasure of passing it on to Alan Reitz. You're still muted, Alan.
A day's not complete without someone saying you're muted. I'm Alan Reitz, Director of Public and Government Affairs at the Hanover Co-op Food Stores. Thank you, Representative Kuster, for your leadership on agriculture and commerce issues. You know, your work is really paying dividends for us here as our state not only just goes through the normal course of business, but certainly in this time of the pandemic. I work on local farm advocacy issues around New Hampshire and around New England, and also on a national scale. Just to put it in perspective for our business, we're an $85 million business that includes 4 grocery stores. We've been a New Hampshire grocer since 1936. And in 2020, we purchased about $16 million worth of local food and regional food from vendors around the region. So for us, local food and a focus on local is not new. COVID certainly put a twist on everything. And Representative Kuster, you and I have had conversations on the importance of the local food shed, not only as the enjoyment that we all find in it, but it's local food security that's also kind of like that backup generator for when the power grid goes down. We had those conversations a number of years ago, and here in the last year, the power grid really got tested when it comes to food in our region and across the country. But our customers were able to find a consistent supply of food because we had primary relationships with local and regional vendors, numbering in the hundreds. We have over 4,000 products that come to us from within a 100-mile radius. But still, those farmers took a huge hit, losing 80% of their market share. Those who did a lot of direct-to-restaurant sales, or hoping that they would see the H-2A visa workers come into the United States to help with harvesting. And I know your work and the work of others help make that possible. So we did get through. We're also able to find secondary and third level sources. I know I had many conversations with our meat merchandiser who was able to find poultry and pork and beef coming from this region. We had it here, and that was such a boon to us. But you can't say that for every place. I mean, we rely on that sustainable food system in New Hampshire. We would have gotten hammered without it. In the past 12 months, we've seen the limits exposed of the nation's consolidated food system. Rural areas, and I've spoken to people directly and heard stories of people who are in rural areas of the country without this secondary supply of food. And they saw their food shipments slow to a trickle in the early months of the pandemic. And when the trucks did arrive, frequently they only carried soda and snacks. And that actually came from a gentleman who's about an hour and a half east of Dallas, Fort Worth. That's a major metropolitan area. They don't necessarily have farmers markets and the CSAs that we rely on. We all know that New Hampshire and New England are never going to feed the world, but our local food system has really provided us with that resilience, and the farmers and the food producers were always there doing the work, and we've really benefited from their efforts. So knowing your return to the House Agriculture Committee is critical to have that voice there. I do have some other issues on my list I want to share. First of all, not in order of priority here, moratorium on mergers and acquisitions. The consolidation within the food industry has really put us in this bind. We need farms of all sizes across this country. Farmers everywhere are doing hard work. This is not a big versus small. This is when you consolidate too much and we expose the weaknesses of this just-in-time delivery system when we need a bit more of a just-in-case delivery network like we've relied on around here. Also, another concern that has just come onto the horizon is the impact that small and medium growers, retailers, and restaurants really are looking at and possibly going to get overwhelmed by FDA's new proposed rule on traceability. We're all for food safety. We live it day in, day out. Without safe food, nobody does well. But the rules that are being designed to solve problems at massive industrial scale, being made to fit one size in our small farms and small food value-added producers, really has to be looked at. It's looking like a real doozy. And then distribution, the channels of distribution of food in the United States, about 90% of it is controlled by about, we'll call it 9 large conglomerates who are buying up some of the smaller regional players. That can make it very hard for our vibrant local food producers who want to start to expand market share around New England to get space on a truck, unless they're all of a sudden losing price and value and taking a hit on viability. So last thing I'll say, and this picks up on something that Aaron said about food security, there are a number of great things. I want to tip our hats to all the farmers and the gleaning programs, and also know that we're trying to expand upon the Vermont Everyone Eats program that did receive some FEMA funding. That supports restaurants, gets food to people in need, and it's a real critical program. I'll leave it at there and turn it over to Sarah Hansen.
Hi, Representative Kuster. Thanks everybody for talking, and I'm super honored to be, I don't know, I feel like I'm in with the big dogs today. This is awesome. I am here representing 2 things that I do for a living. I am a co-owner, co-worker at Warner Public Market, a small food and art cooperative grocery store in Warner. We are 3 years old, so it was 2020 was a great time to turn 3, I also have been working for 8 years at Kearsarge Gore Farm. We have oh no, I froze.
We can still see you,
Oh,
Sarah.
you can, okay, good,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah,
I'm gonna keep
good.
talking.
You're
You guys
good.
are
Keep
frozen.
Keep going.
It's a family farm, so it's my.
Oh, whoop, there maybe we did lose you. Do you want to try to phone in? Would that be less stress on your system?
I could jump in and take over here, and hopefully Sarah can log back in.
Sure, that'd be great. Go right ahead.
Okay.
Just
I'll let
introduce
Sarah-
yourself, Brett.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, my name is Brett Ingold. I'm also one of the co-owners and working members at Warner Public Market in Warner, New Hampshire. We're a small, as Sarah was saying, a small multi-stakeholder cooperative. And just a little quick background on the market. You know, three of the reasons that we got into this, and it fits into the conversation today. Everyone's brought up really great points. Was recognizing there is this growing local food movement. But one issue is, like, you know, even before COVID, I'm not sure where this is at now, but there was a recognition that the kind of direct marketing model that had gotten the local food movement advanced quite a bit, but the CSA and farmers market, that had plateaued for a while. For a number of years, a study by the Cooperative Extension revealed that. So, you know, part of our thinking was, you know, to get local food and our regional food system to the next level, to meet these kind of regional goals, we needed more outlets for small producers, and we need more farmers to meet these food goals as well. And even, you know, some of the larger co-ops and grocery stores, they need a scale that small beginning farmers can't necessarily meet. So we kind of like to think that we're filling that gap a little bit. And then also recognizing that with the direct marketing model, which has been a fantastic boon for farmers, but it also puts all the responsibility on the farmer, the marketing, the distributing, and, you know, customer relations, all these things. And if we're going to meet these food goals regionally, we need the farmers to be farming and other people to be taking care of a lot of that marketing and distribution. So those were two of the reasons we started our little co-op here. And the third reason, you know, rural economic development was mentioned, and we think that, you know, food is really unifying things, and especially in these kind of divided and divisive times, food is really something we can connect and relate to each other on. So, you know, we're right on Main Street. We wanted a brick and mortar, kind of 7 days a week local food store right in a rural or small town of around 3,000 people, and having kind of local food at the heart of that village. And we were able to take an old building that hadn't been used for a while. So we'd like to think that, you know, this might be a model that other towns, and we are seeing it, we're certainly not the only one, that are kind of these little local regional food stores, freeing up time for farmers, giving them an additional outlet, and kind of, you know, filling those gaps that, you know, the Hanover Co-op does a fantastic job for, and the Concord Co-op for these more urban areas. But what are these in-between spots? How can they kind of meet these needs as well? So that's why we got into this. And COVID was, you know, I think it was kind of alluded to it in New Hampshire. COVID, in a way, was a boost to the local food system. Certainly there was a lot of uncertainty, but not being a kind of large commodity crop area, we saw an increase in our business. So it's less like about relief and how can we, you know, make up for losses. It's more, how can we build? And we saw a model, a window into what the local food system could be. These local farms responding, new collaborations, and how can we build on that to better meet, you know, the current ongoing crisis, but future crises as well, related to climate change and you know, God forbid, but other future pandemics. So we're really happy to, you know, the other people on this call brought up some really great points. I did want to just echo a little bit with what Alan was saying about, you know, New Hampshire's farm scale is so much different than a lot of the country and New England in general. So that a lot of those USDA programs, and there are some fantastic programs out there, but it's really difficult for our small farms who are also trying to take care of marketing and distribution, all these things, to access a lot of these programs. It's just that time is kind of the biggest resource. It's hard to find for a lot of these farms. So anything that can be done to reduce this kind of one size fits all and find a niche perhaps for small and local farms, I think would be a real boon to our region and the farming that's happening here.
Well, Brett, thank you for jumping in. And Sarah, if you can hear us, feel free to join us back up by phone, and we'll get you back into the conversation. I feel your pain with the bandwidth, because usually if we do this at 11 o'clock in the morning, I lose my Zoom when everyone on my road is working at the same time. I wanted to follow up, Brett, just along those lines in terms of the impact of COVID. I think partly people, certainly the food scarcity issues and food being in the news as a scarce product, what got everybody's attention. I did a lot of phone calls and Zoom meetings with not just farmers, but the grocers and the food distributors. And, these were really frontline workers at that point, trying to figure out how we were going to manage the warehouses and what would the safety protocols were going to be and all of that. But I wanted to ask, how did you adapt in terms of safety, first of all, during the pandemic for your employees and communities? And I'd love to hear from Hanover Co-op as well about that. And then also, did you notice from people being home more, having less options for entertainment, certainly a lot less options for going out to eat? Did you see increased engagement around healthy food? So we'll start with Brett, and then I think Sarah may be back, and we'll give her a shot. And Alan, if you've got any comment on that.
Sure. Senator Kuster, I'd be happy to speak to that. Yeah, I think, we did have a little advantage being small. We don't have multiple outlets like the co-op. I'm sure that was a much more complicated logistic process, but being a small workers cooperative, and, the demographics of New Hampshire has a lot of high-risk population. A lot of our customers are in that high-risk population. So we took it very seriously. I'm not positive, but I think we may have been one of the first stores in the state to go completely curbside service, and get a whole full, having some millennials in our group perhaps helped too. We were able to go an online store like really quickly. Within a couple of weeks, we had a full online marketplace, and we're offering curb service and home delivery. Closed the store floor. It was a lot of hard decisions, but we decided to opt on, taking every precaution possible, rather than incremental steps, to make sure, even if we were only keeping a few people safe, make sure we kept everyone safe. And I think, because of that, we've gotten some really loyal customers. The people were traveling all the way from Concord to us in the beginning because we did adopt those steps so early. And a lot of those folks have stayed with us. We have now opened up a little small, little mini mart, we call it, a corner of the store, and the local chamber actually was really great. Kearsarge Chamber, helping us put in the ventilation system so the air changes over like every 10 minutes.
Wow.
So we have been able to open our doors a little bit, but we're still doing mainly online and curb service. It hasn't been easy. That was a stressful week for sure there. But our team being a small group and a workers cooperative, we were able to adapt and change a lot more quickly than perhaps some larger operations were able to, and people really appreciated it for sure.
Sarah, you want to jump in if you're back with us? Anything you want to add, or anything from your remarks that you got cut off?
I'm so sorry, you guys. I don't know what happened. My computer just fritzed, I think, at the inopportune moment. I'll finish really, really quick, and then I'll segue into this question. I think one of the things that's close to home for me right now is being a young farmer and watching a lot of my friends, acquaintances reach out and say, hey, I really want to farm. How do I get land? I'm struggling with student debt. How am I going to manage that while I'm farming? I'm trying to find a house, but housing prices are crazy, especially in rural areas where people are kind of holding on to homes, or people have second vacation homes. Focusing on rural areas and focusing on young farmers, creating policies of student debt forgiveness for young farmers, creating better housing policies for, especially focusing on the BIPOC community, helping people who have been systemically disenfranchised gain access to land and home will be really important in the future. So as a young farmer, I guess I'll just add that this last year was wild. There was a huge demand for everything that we had on our farm. We saw that at the store, and I saw that on the farm. Finding help was hard. you know, there aren't a lot of people who are, you know, super committed to farms. We have a thin margin. We really want people to be trained. People need that, that's kind of skill set to be able to farm. It's not a, you know, it's not something that you just get dropped into. Yeah, kind of like Seth was saying, you know, our customers were reaching out to us in different ways, figuring out how they could get our stuff in a safe way. We saw like a, you know, mixed reception at our farmers markets. So we kind of had to adapt to how we were gonna stay safe, how we were gonna keep our workers safe and make an income all at the same time. And it felt like a lot more work on our end to do that marketing and to do that outreach. And I'm really thankful for a lot of our community partners who helped educate people about, you know, what was safe, where can we get this, where can I get food if I don't have food right now, all of those things. So we just saw a lot of people step up in those resilient ways that rural communities do. There was like a lot of, you know, the fabric was there, and I think we just saw a lot of things tighten. And I'm so eager, as I'm sure everybody is, for the upcoming year to see what kind of policies we can put in place that will keep those bonds really strong.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you got back with us. Alan, can you comment the two COVID issues, one, keeping your customers and your employees safe, and then number two, just people's reactions, having more time, doing more cooking, spending more time at home, less restaurant eating.
Sure.
Have you seen greater engagement in healthy eating?
We have, and I think that food safety and keeping people safe does start with our 350 employees. And just a note to our friends down there at Warner, just because we've got the size, I look at your market and I understand that on a small business perspective, you don't necessarily have an IT department. You might have millennials, et cetera, but my hat's really off to all the small businesses. For our business, it did start with the 350 plus employees. We began meeting as a leadership team 5 days a week, and 5 days a week, an email went out to all staff telling them exactly what was discussed, as well messaging out to our membership. So I think those were key points. We still meet twice a week. An email went out just this morning detailing exactly what's going on in our business. Communication with a membership-based organization. I mean, we've got 24,000 member owners, but not everybody is on an email distribution list. So it takes a lot of communication within the stores. Interesting side note, I believe we all probably saw that in the early days, there was a lot of this, thank you, our essential workers. And that was really heartwarming. People got stressed after a while, and there was pressure on our teams. And I think we were able to work through that. And let's face it, everybody's nerves got frazzled with this thing called COVID. Now to go to your other question on reaction, increase in healthy eating, yes. Focus on ingredients. We saw a wonderful push and belief in local, and we want to see that passion for local food continue among consumers, whether they shop with us or shop at a chain store. Our online cooking classes are now just $7 a class just to help cover our costs. Great interest in that. Change in how retail sales have gone. We've seen our customer visits drop, and our basket size, how many products go in a basket, or the cost of the basket, go way up. When it came to instituting curbside, we took a go slow approach because we weren't quite as nimble as, say, a smaller market, and we really took our time. It's in place. We now have close to 10,000 products available online, and it's here to stay. We're not going to pull the plug when any pandemic goes away. So increase in healthy eating, focus on local. We've seen people really comply with our policies, and we followed whatever the CDC said. We believed it, stood by it, and also tried to err on the side of caution. I hope that covers some of the thoughts you were looking for.
Very, very helpful. And I should just give you a shout out as a mother. so my younger son Travis lived in Brooklyn, and he stayed in Brooklyn for about a week. He said to me, "Mom, I'm fine, don't worry." And then a week later, he said, "Mom, maybe I'd rather come home to New Hampshire." So he's living up in the Upper Valley and is a huge fan of the co-op, has become a big foodie, cooking and healthy eating, and he and his girlfriend are all over it. But he just raves about the quality of the produce, the quality of the products that are available. He loves the connection to the farmers. If we see him on the weekend, he'll tell me, where this particular cheese or yogurt is made or where these are grown. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's really a healthy, nice thing.
Thank you.
So moving right along here, I wanted to get everybody else in on the project. And my next question is about whether we've seen a shift in consumers looking to purchase local. We've talked quite a bit about that. And let's maybe bring in Aaron and Seth from your perspective. Do you think this new momentum will sustain and help local farmers to grow? And do we have the systems in place to meet the demand to the extent that people are more engaged in local food?
That's a great question. Maybe I'll start, Seth. And so our annual statewide gathering is coming up in March for the New Hampshire Food Alliance, and the theme is harvesting the momentum. So just exactly what you said, how can we take what we've learned, build on this momentum and interest in local food, and really make sure that we have that infrastructure there to really support the growth for local. Because as we know, we could be, folks in New Hampshire could be eating a lot more New Hampshire grown products than they are right now. So one of the things that we've been working on with the Food Alliance is actually building out a network of food hubs here in New Hampshire. So we have a USDA grant that is helping us to build a network, a food hub network. So we've got about 6 food hubs now in New Hampshire that are working together to try to make sure that they are connected and they can help each other supply their growing customer bases. So if folks up in, let's see, the Belknap food shed, food hub needs some carrots and they don't have any, somebody down at Three Rivers Farmers Alliance down in the Seacoast might be able to get them up there. And so they'd be able to supply their customers. So that's one of the, this idea of this fabric that Sarah was talking about, building these relationships, building that infrastructure out. So those are some of the ways, I think, like Alan said, some of the new online ways that people are now connecting, buying products online, home delivery. A lot of our producers have been able to pivot really quickly to these new forms of purchasing and buying. And we're hoping that those will stay because they've made it more accessible for people who might not be able to go to the farmer's market every week, for example. Seth, I don't know if you want to jump in and have some other thoughts too.
So that's one of the $10 million questions. Will we see this move forward as a permanent? We're guessing yes. 1, because we're optimistic. 2, we know that there's great customer satisfaction. And so we do know that requires some new skills from farmers. So Brett had mentioned the IT, the millennials. So we're seeing database management for online sales that never before was the case. So I have this much I'm offering in the farm stand, and that same inventory is also being offered online. How do we help those come together? We are also seeing that when going to a farm was also somewhat of an experience. So what does that do to the curbside? Does it become the experience of the home delivery? And then also from the food justice perspective, do all socioeconomic levels have access? Can they afford that? And so how do we then go about and put systems in place where those that have greater means can pay for and offset the cost for those that don't have those means? And so the SNAP EBT program was really quite helpful in helping to equalize that. So that was wonderful. And so Dr. Annalena Bruce at UNH was looking at a food systems grant to really have the UNH Survey Center survey 2,000 people from around the region. What were the things that had you engage these businesses, and will you continue? That grant sadly wasn't funded, but we're going to try again to have that happen. So I'm going to err on the side of yes. We're helping our farmers plan on the side of yes. And as I mentioned, a lot of that farm management, those skills in marketing, market channel analysis, pricing, what is a price that actually is based off of cost of production, those type of things, those are going to be key. And I was really excited when you had mentioned the Northern Border Regional Commission had that dedicated money. We do believe to help farmers, you have to know ag production, you have to know ag market channels. So we have seen limitations when SBA have attempted to work with farmers, which is not to say that that's not part of the solution. But the Agriculture Viability Alliance, which formerly was known as the Blueprint, is 37 ag organizations from New England and New York coming together, public, private, nonprofit, to see how do we actually try and meet some of those needs. So that might be something.
That would be a perfect organization for Northern Borders Regional Commission, and we've doubled the funding. So as I say, we're up to $30 million. Is a lot of money, and that's out the door every year. So those grants, I mean, we've had grants for $1 million this cycle. But they're typically, 500,000, 250,000. So I'd love to see that group come together, and Charlotte and my team could definitely help with that application. We've got some great suggestions online, and I want to read this. The state of New Hampshire needs a large and dynamic 100 plus vendors, year-round, centrally located farmers market, exclamation. The state and Department of Agriculture needs to back it and help to set it up. Look at the accomplishments of other states. And that's Joan O'Connor from Henniker. Any thoughts on that type of ambitious? I love to think big. And I know, on a local level, the farmers market here in Hopkinton is doing great and continuing through the winter months. I've done a lot of work with the Salem Farmers Market, getting them, venue and helping with their funding and maybe the online will give more of an opportunity for some of these farmers markets to make it through the winter months. But your thoughts on that concept of, the problem is one person's local is another person's long drive. So I don't know that bringing the whole thing to one place may be more regionally adapted, but just your sense of the farmers markets. And yeah, go ahead, Alan, dive in.
Yeah, I love that that passion and that focus, and that's what we need. We also need to understand that new farmers, young and new farmers, need to have access to land and also support from the sorts of funds that help them get off the ground with that $0 to $25,000. Many of these young farmers, they're going to need an off-farm income. And then it's to stay with them and do what's inconvenient. And by that, I mean, go to your farmers markets. I've said this publicly, I'll say it again. If you come and shop at our co-op food stores and buy local produce, that's great. I'm fine with you also saving some of your purchases out and going to a farmer's market or a farm stand and buying there, because 100 cents of the dollar goes to the farmer. And in the end, we all win.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Edith Tucker had a question. We do have some press on the line, and Edith is a reporter from up north. She was asking me what subcommittees I'm on. And it's conservation and forestry is one, nutrition and oversight is another. And I'm glad you mentioned the small, the new farmers and ranchers. That's a program that I've been very, very supportive of. And all of the issues, Sarah, that you mentioned about new farmers and ranchers, people of color, young people getting into the growing of food and the distribution of food, I think is really, really important. Obviously, it's challenging. This is hard work. And if you're born and raised in it, it's hard enough to be the third or fourth or fifth generation farmer and have the land. One of the ways that I first got involved in this, this is going back, well, more than 10 years, because it was before I ran for Congress. I worked with a local farmer, Jane Presby in Concord, to raise the funds for her to put together a sustainability long-term transition plan. Her parents had died. They'd been on that family farm for 3 generations. And you know, it could have been sold out from underneath her with development and McMansions and beautiful views. And instead, we raised the funds locally and worked with an organization that actually, she has a life tenancy. And then when she stops farming, they'll bring in a young farmer and keep that farm going. And so I've learned a lot from Jane and her colleagues about the value added products and, you know, really trying to get revenue to the farm community here in New Hampshire, because it is a tough way of life. Sarah, can I bring you and Brett in on that concept of value added, and how do you, and actually, Alan, you may have thoughts on this, or any of the panel. How can we help, whether it's technical assistance or creating new markets, for people? You know, I've met so many great farmers. There's a wonderful woman that makes pudding from her products. Obviously, yogurt comes to mind, cheese comes to mind, maple syrup. But how can we help bring that infusion of cash and greater dollar per effort into the farm community, a farm economy? So Sarah, if you want to go ahead, and then we'll pass that one around.
Yeah, I can start on that for sure. One thing I think definitely that Alan had mentioned earlier was that traceability regulation that's in play right now with
Yeah,
FSMA.
we'll definitely look at that for sure.
Yeah, I definitely think
sure.
that would be a hindrance on the value added. You know, and I love what Erin and the Food Alliance and the network of food hubs is doing too. I definitely think that the more communication there is between various networks, the more data you can compile about what there's a need for in New Hampshire. One of the things that I struggle with, it's like, well, you know, I really want a locally made X product or whatever. And then I have to go and search it. Or people will come and say, hey, I really I want to start a business. What can I do? And it's, you know, trying to match the need with the passion about creating. So I think, you know, kind of reverse engineering, like, hey, we need, you know, locally made sour cream or something, you know. Yeah, more data for people who want to get into the business and be a part of something, but might not know how it's financially feasible for them to start. They might not want to go sit at a farmer's market for 4 hours, but they would love to sell to the Hanover Co-op or the Warner Public Market.
Yeah, I was thinking of that when we were talking about the farmers markets, is how time intensive that is. Alan, you talked about how many products did you have? 10,000 or something? Well, how do you make a decision about when you take on one more kind of cheese?
Well, it's actually 40,000 products are in our stores in total. About 4,000 products come from the local and regional food shed. So we've got a team with us who've just, they really think carefully. And I won't go too long on this, but I'd love to share stories offline with you sometime. One of the things we do is we look for ways to fill holes in the marketplace. Well, that's good business. But we also always have to try to stay one step ahead of the chain stores. You know, at one time we sold more Newman's Own products than anybody in the Northeast. Well, that's no longer the case. But when we can find that uncommon cheese or that cream cheese, then that's the new product. There's a great salsa, Hot Juan salsa from New Hampshire. Once we had that on our shelves, Who thought you needed another salsa? But it's a small business, part of the economy. He's working out of, again, a food hub. And so these are success stories. So it's careful. And I, again, always love to hear the stories coming out of the food hubs, as Aaron mentioned. That's just vibrancy that we need more of. And again, thank you, Representative Kuster, for taking a look at that food traceability issue. It's really been brought to my attention by our friends, Roger down at New England Farmers Union. And these are things that can fly by, and all of a sudden you're trying to untangle a problem.
Yep.
We need
Yep.
to stay ahead.
Yep. Yep.
Could I add
Good.
something quick on the value-added product?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Brent.
We have, there's a great model, and we're actually working on kind of reproducing it here in Warner with the new community facility we got. But the Genuine Local Kitchen, these kind of food incubators that are helping food entrepreneurs and shared kitchen space, because it's a big hurdle to get a licensed kitchen and all the work, all that equipment. But these kind of shared use spaces, these community kitchens, having a distribution of them around the region really can allow food entrepreneurs to enter into the market. And then maybe once they grow out of that, they can start their own operation. But I think that's a really exciting model here in the state that we're working on reproducing in Warner as well. And it'd be nice to see. I don't know if there's anything like it on the Seacoast. I believe Keene's got something along those lines in the Monadnock region.
And they're talking about it on the Seacoast as well, Brett. And I just want to jump in and say, I totally agree with that. These shared use processing facilities are really important, both to increase market access, so to get into some of these institutional markets for local producers, schools, hospitals, places like that. I think another big thing that we hear a lot is processing for meat here in New Hampshire.
Yes.
And I know there's some federal regulations that are coming online that might make it easier for local meat producers to get their products to market. And that's a big concern that we hear a lot.
Yeah, that's been a problem for many, many years. I can remember back in the New Hampshire state legislature battling that issue. And, we've talked, I think someone had mentioned consolidation. And one of the things we saw, I think it's 80% of the nation's meat is processed, chicken and beef and pork, processed by just a handful of companies. And what we saw was those companies, I was on those calls about how just incredibly poorly they handled the precautions for their employees during COVID outbreaks. Last spring, if you looked at the top 10 COVID outbreaks in the country, half a dozen of them were counties of meat processing, poultry processing, worst in the country. And suddenly all of our meat comes from one source and people didn't even realize. So I think one of the things pushing back on the consolidation is creating the facilities and the opportunities at the local level. Well, we are wrapping up. I'm glad we got that one in. There were some great comments in the chat, and please know that we will follow up. And they're trying to send them to me now quickly, but sorry, we're one of the issues is increasing food production and consumption at the regional level. The New England Food Systems Planners Partnership, which includes the New Hampshire Food Alliance, is working to explore policy and investment with the goal of increasing the amount of food produced and consumed within New England from 10% to 35%. And their work is under a USDA grant, which is great. I'm excited about that. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for being a part of this. And we will we'll do it again. I think there's a lot on this topic, and I'm just excited to be back on the Ag Committee. And please follow up with Charlotte if you have suggestions, ideas, solutions, and grievances. We're open to it all. So thanks very much. And we will definitely follow up on the FDA issue. Thanks for being with us. Take
Thanks
good
so
care.
much.
Thank
Stay
you.
safe,
Thank you very much.
everyone.